This image of a hand reaching into a void captures the strict baseline of human existence. Every decision we make operates on a deficit model. We act because we lack. This psychology breaks down into two distinct mechanical vectors. First, we seek external benefit to fill a void, like consuming calories to cure physical hunger. Second, we repel external harm to maintain baseline integrity, like building a shelter to cure the vulnerability of cold. Because this cause and effect loop defines our entire biological reality, we assume it governs the rest of existence. We map our own psychological deficits onto the mechanics of the universe. This projection scales up entirely unchecked. When observing the cosmos, we naturally anthropomorphize its origin, asking what the Creator's goal was, or what it wanted to achieve by bringing physical matter into existence. But applying a motive to an absolute, perfect entity breaks the basic logic of perfection. To act toward a goal requires a state of desire, and a state of desire requires a lack of the desired object. Projecting our deficit-driven needs onto the cosmos does not yield philosophical truth. It creates a localized, biologically constrained model that is mathematically incompatible with the concept of ultimate reality. In the 11th century, the Ismaili philosopher Nasser Khosrow dismantled this contradiction in his text The Al-Akhwan by grounding his argument strictly in ontological first principles. Khosrow begins by defining substance, or jawhar. Substance is the baseline structural layer of material reality that allows an entity to accept opposing forces, like heat and cold, or benefit and harm. He then strictly separates the creator from this baseline. The divine is transcendent unity, tawhid. It sits entirely outside the framework of substance and is therefore immune to its dualities. This diagram maps the mechanics of benefit under Khosrow's logic. To receive a benefit structurally requires a green vector descending from an external entity. You can only extract an advantage from a source that possesses something you lack, placing that source higher than you in the hierarchy of power. Repelling harm carries the exact same structural vulnerability. To push back against an opposing force implies that you are susceptible to damage. You are forced to react to an entity capable of degrading your state. Now we isolate the central node and apply these mechanical vectors to the concept of a creator. If a creator acts to gain a benefit from its creation, it instantly shatters its own supreme position. It requires the creation to supply something it lacks, rendering the absolute dependent and subordinate to its own physical universe. Defining God through human motivations, like purpose, profit, or defense, mathematically degrades the divine into a weak, incomplete entity bound by the very physics it supposedly authored. Khosrow tests his logic against a strict limit case, the Akal, or universal intellect. In Neoplatonic cosmology, this is the absolute highest and first created entity. This 3D pyramid models the hierarchy of existence. The Akal sits at the absolute pinnacle. It exists above all material reality, all human psychology, and all subsequent creation. Because nothing exists conceptually or physically above the intellect, it is structurally impossible for it to receive a benefit. There is no higher node to extract an advantage from. Likewise, the intellect cannot suffer harm. Nothing below its absolute threshold possesses the necessary power to degrade its entirety or force it into a defensive posture. Khosrow synthesizes this limit lease into a final proof. The universal intellect is entirely self-sufficient, requiring no transactional relationship with the universe to maintain its state. If the highest created intellect is completely immune to the structural vectors of benefit and harm, then attributing profit-seeking, desire, or purpose to the uncreated source itself is an outright absurdity. Pure deductive logic effectively solves the equation, but treating existence as a sterile, geometric proof feels detached from the human experience of reality. This text displays the exact same metaphysical framework, translated into the poetic meter of Jalal al-Din Rumi's Mathnawi. The verse reads, "I did not create the universe to gain a profit. Rather, I created to shower bounty upon my servants." Rumi explicitly aligns with Khosrow's mathematical rigor. The verse confirms that the absolute rejects the vector of benefit. Creation is not a transaction designed to yield a return on investment. To explain why a perfect entity acts without need, Rumi introduces the concept of Jude, or bounty. This is an entirely different mechanical vector, a unidirectional overflowing of existence. The absolute is so entirely full of reality that it radiates existence outward. This dynamic expansion occurs inherently, without diminishing or altering the completeness of the source. Hey everyone, enjoying this video? Hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear what you think. Your support really means a lot and helps me keep creating content for you all. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. In Rumi's framework, logical immutability does not result in a dead, static reality. It produces a vibrant universe born entirely of non-transactional generosity, free from the mechanics of lack. This timeline shifts our focus to Europe, tracking how Western philosophy collided with the exact same paradox of an acting yet perfect absolute. In ancient Greece, Aristotle confronted the mechanics of existence by outlining the necessity of a prima movens, the unmoved mover. To avoid the infinite regress of cause and effect, Aristotle required that this prime mover exist as actus purus, pure actuality. Pure actuality demands absolute zero potentiality. There is no unfulfilled state, no unreached goal, and no capacity to become something else. Possessing potentiality implies a capacity for improvement or change. If the mover could change its state to achieve a goal, it was not perfect to begin with. This sphere demonstrates Aristotle's solution. The mover initiates the mechanics of the universe simply by being the ultimate object of desire. It causes motion in everything else, while remaining perfectly static, seeking absolutely nothing for itself. Fast forward to the 17th century, and Western rationalism drives this logic to its absolute extreme. In his treatise Ethics, Baruch Spinoza consolidates existence into a unified framework of substance, which he terms Deus sive natura, God or nature. Spinoza aggressively rejects teleology. He argues fiercely against the assumption that God directs the universe toward a specific planned end goal. His proof operates on the exact logic Khosrow utilized 6 centuries earlier. Acting to achieve a purpose is an admission that you currently lack that purpose. Spinoza resolves this by concluding that God acts purely out of the necessity of its own perfect nature. It does not calculate benefit, it simply unfolds. Across entirely different historical and cultural contexts, rigorous rational deduction forces the same conclusion. A perfect entity is strictly incapable of acting from a place of need, purpose, or acquisition. When we shift the philosophical lens to ancient China, the methodology changes. The geometric deductions of the Middle East and Europe are replaced by organic observation, yet they arrive at identical mechanics. In the Tao Te Ching, Laozi outlines the Tao, or the way. It is the unnameable source that sustains the myriad things of the world. This flowing water illustrates the Taoist principle of Wu Wei, effortless action. It is action entirely devoid of localized intention. The Tao nourishes physical existence and guides the cosmos, but it does so without claiming ownership, calculating a benefit, or acting out of desire. Laozi observes water dropping to the lowest places to nourish life, requiring no logical proof to see what Khosrow deduced through mathematics. The highest source operates without a transactional agenda. We find the same structural mechanics in classical Indian philosophy, particularly within Adi Shankara's Advaita Vedanta. Shankara defines Brahman as the ultimate reality. It is strictly nirguna, completely devoid of distinct attributes, desires, or qualifying characteristics. This visualization of a perfectly sealed geometric vessel captures the Vedantic concept of Purna, or absolute fullness. Because Brahman is infinite completeness, not a single element can be added to improve it, and nothing can be subtracted to harm it. To explain the existence of the physical universe, Advaita introduces Leela, or divine play. Creation is a spontaneous, unprompted manifestation of this fullness, bypassing the logic of necessity entirely. Eastern cosmology perfectly reflects the rigorous deductions of the West. Creation is an involuntary, spontaneous overflow of absolute completeness. It is never a transaction designed to patch a vulnerability. The initial error lies in our own biology. We operate through a psychology of deficit, assuming that existence itself must be striving toward a goal, attempting to secure an advantage, or fleeing from harm. Khosrow's mathematical proofs demonstrate that mapping this localized human behavior onto the absolute is a cosmological absurdity. This single model converges the global philosophical consensus: Rumi's poetic bounty, Aristotle's pure actuality, Spinoza's necessity, and the effortless Tao all isolate the same fundamental truth. To accurately perceive the foundation of reality, we have to strip away the language of human reason and the mechanics of biological need. The transcendent unity does not require our existence to benefit it. It cannot be degraded by our harm. It simply, completely, and necessarily is.